Okay, it's time for some brutally tough love here. The reason you're stagnating is because you thought you got good enough to no longer need to use one of these. I don't care how good you are, I don't care how long you've been playing. In fact, advanced players are probably the most guilty of them all. Beginners might be inclined as a way of using it to internalize simple rhythms like quarter notes, eighth notes, and half notes. Intermediate players all too often will fall into the trap of forming a lifelong habit of thinking about this as simply a way to gauge your progress in terms of speed and how fast you can play something. By the time players get to advanced, all too often they will never turn pro. Never. Because they put this away and fall into crappy habits and have crappy time. So I'm going to show you today how I continue to use a metronome over 30 years into this. There's no excuse for any player to not be using one. Guitar players have gotten away with too much for too long. And furthermore, whereas maybe there was at least a little bit more of an excuse 15 years ago when it wasn't so easy, now you can get them for free on your phone. Right here. The Pro Metronome app is free and it's very good and it does way more than the old metronomes ever could dream of doing. At every level of the game, you should be working with one. If I got a little passionate there and even a little bit dramatic, it's because it's a drag to play with people that don't have great time. And I was really annoyed over a very large footprint saying that it's such a bore to practice with a metronome, so you should just use drum loops or a drum machine to simulate real-world experiences. Okay, here's why that's crappy advice. Number one, Tommy Emmanuel still practices with a metronome and says you should too. Number two, you're definitely not practicing your time when you're working with a drum machine or drum loops. You're practicing your listening skills. And at that point, you're listening to something else or someone else and relying on them in order to establish the time. Newsflash, it's not the drummer's job to keep good time. It's not the bass player's job to establish a great groove. It's everybody's job. And furthermore, you might find yourself in a situation with a drummer who really doesn't have very good time. And you can have good time and no groove. For example, just load up a lifeless MIDI block. Or you can also have great groove but not incredible time. And actually, if you have that, okay. Now I don't have a source on this and I always like to provide sources and documentation so that everything I say on this channel can be backed up by actual evidence. But I heard from Jim Nichols, who played with Chet, recorded with Tommy, toured with Van Morrison and Kenny Rankin and Tom Waits. He told me that he heard that when Steve Gadd got to New York City, that Steve Gadd had to actually work on his time. In other words, nobody is too good to work on this stuff. The first step, which you should definitely do for yourself, even though I don't really do this very often at all anymore, only because I've been working with a metronome for quite some time now. But if I was starting all over again, I would absolutely make this step one. The first step is just establish the tempo of the piece of music you're playing. In order to do this, you want to establish the tempo in beats per minute. Suppose it's 90 beats per minute in 4/4 time, and you're just going to set the metronome to click on every single beat. Because of my natural inclinations and the kind of music that I'm into, generally I like to practice a shuffle groove over a blues. I like to practice something straighter and a bit more funkier. And then I like to practice some Chet-style finger picking too. Here's a shuffle in B at 90 beats per minute with the click on every single beat, interspersed with a few licks if I just can't help myself. But the basic groove will be like... As I said a few moments ago, I would also work on the same thing with a straight groove, something that's not a shuffle, beginning with 4 clicks to the bar, a click on every single beat. As you're working on it, the next thing that I would do is then mute the click on beats 1 and 3 And if you're doing this with an old school, just regular plain old metronome, that's going to involve setting the tempo to half of what it was before. That was 90 beats per minute. So if all I had was an old metronome, I would set it to 45 beats per minute. And then you're just going to be listening to the click on beats 2 and 4. Now 1 and 3 are gone, and you've got to try to lock in as if the drummer were only playing on 2 and 4. I also want to mention at this point in the video that the reason I have the vintage Strat out and I'm not using the Hollenbeck or the acoustic guitar or doing any finger picking with it is because I told you early on I absolutely practice this stuff in all styles, but because video lights are hot and because I generally kill a set of strings every video I do for you, I didn't want to keep annihilating string set after string set. Although GHS, thank you publicly, GHS has been incredibly good to me for decades. So after you're feeling things on the 2 and 4, then have the tempo from there. If it was an old school metronome and 45 BPM is where I had it set for the 2 and 4 for a piece of music that's really at 90 BPM but set to the 2 and 4, I would have the tempo again. 45 divided by 2. If you have something digital that can do 22.5, ideal. Otherwise, just round it up or down. But the nice thing about the Pro Metronome app is you don't have to mess with any of that. Right there, even on the free version, you just mute the beats that you want. So set the Pro Metronome app to only click on beat 1. Once you've internalized beat 1, then internalize beat 2, then internalize beat 3, then internalize beat 4. I could keep demonstrating this at every step of the way for you, but at that point, you're just watching me play, and I'd much rather have you be the one doing the playing. You get to be the one doing the practicing, feeling the improvement for yourself. So that's the right concept and the right idea. You might spend months only working with the metronome at 2 and 4 before you're comfortable moving it to half of that and having it click on only one beat of the measure. But every step of the way is going to keep internalizing your time, and the groove is going to come from knowing that you can play with the pocket and always land back where the beat belongs. A great drummer might not be playing exactly where the click lands on 2 and 4. They might pull it back, or they might be right on top, or at times there may be an artistic reason to push it forward a little bit. But a great drummer can always land on the beat. It's the same thing with a great guitar player or a great bass player. Great singers have great pocket too. All great musicians have internalized a deep sense of this. I would rather have groove and very little technique than technique with no groove. I hope that helps and sets you on a path to really start making meaningful progress with all of this stuff. The better you get, the more that you can help to elevate the entire situation when you start to play with other musicians. Once you've internalized a better sense of groove than you would get just practicing with a drum machine or metronome on every click, then you can start to be artistic with it and really groove with the metronome or drum machine far more so than if you were just listening to every single click and every single beat that the drum machine played. No, you become the groove machine, and then you groove with the drum machine or metronome. You don't rely on it in order to be the groove for you. It's so much fun when you start to feel the progress, and getting better is a lot of fun. It's kept me going for over 3 decades now. If you haven't subscribed and you're enjoying this, be sure to do so and hit the bell. I can see that there are people watching this who are not subscribed, and I can see that there are people subscribed who didn't hit the bell. I want you to get notified when I put out more stuff because I'm doing it for you. So keep enjoying the guitar, and I'll see you again on Down the Line the next time.